Every time there's that fear that comes up, but that's where Clara is so helpful for me, is because when I come back to logging and like reflecting, I'm like, I'm being honest with myself. I'm figuring out this stuff as I go. So it's never perfect. Even
Mhm.
after figuring out, I think it's about giving ourselves grace and figuring out what makes us feel strong. But grace is a big thing on this journey.
Welcome, Jillian, to Dating Intentionally. I am so excited to talk to you all about Clara today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Excited to start 2024 strong. I've been getting into my routines of everything. So I'm really happy to be here and then this is my second podcast of this year. So excited to do a podcast.
Yay, I feel honored. Well, I like to kick things off with a hinge prompt just to kind of get to know you a little better. And so the listeners can get to know you. So, this hinge prompt, I know you're very familiar with the dating apps. I wonder is give me travel tips for.
I need travel tips for Paris. I'm actually going there this summer. Not a romantic thing. I'm not in a relationship at the present. I'm going with my mom and my brother. So I'm excited to kind of experience Paris for the first time. So I definitely need some travel tips for Paris.
Love Paris. I mean, it's beautiful. Going with your mom, that sounds amazing. How long are you going for?
We're kind of doing a longer trip. It's going to be around like 10 to 12 days. So we're doing different areas of it. I'm so blessed. My mom, it was one of her big birthdays, and she's like, I want to travel. And my brother and I are available to do it. My brother's in college. So we're like, let's go. And here we go. Yeah, it'll be
Yes.
fun.
I love traveling with my mom too. That's going to be so special. And offline, I could definitely give you some tips if you are actually looking for it. I think, by the way, that would be a great thing to put on your. I don't know if you're on the apps right now, but I do think that would be a good answer. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think I probably should start updating. I know one of the things that I get from dating coaches all the time and like hints is make sure that you're updating your apps. And honestly, I don't know that I've done it this year yet. So good call out, because
Yeah.
here I am gonna go and update my apps with that prompt.
Love it. Well, I am really excited to talk to you today all about Clara for Daters, not a dating app.
Yeah, not a dating app.
So let's start at the beginning. And I'm curious, like before Clara, what made you want to start tracking or taking notes on your dates?
First of all, I'm not necessarily an experienced dater. I never was. Like growing up, I was very much focused on school and getting into a great university. And then right after college, really, leaning into work and being that, super successful businesswoman. So I didn't really date a lot. Like I didn't learn how to date. I wasn't dating a lot in high school at all. In college, maybe one boyfriend for a little bit, and very not like serious at all. So I wasn't like picking up the things on what was feeling good, what doesn't feel good, what's healthy for me, what's not. So all of these things was very new to me. And then when I graduated college and was out in the workforce, dating apps came around that time. I think Tinder was 2012. I graduated in 2011. So it was all just like, okay, well, this is where you date. But then I'm
Mhm.
like, wait, I don't have like the capability to actually sort through like what I actually feels good with all of this information. And unfortunately, because of not having that skill, I wasn't able to identify early on in a relationship that I got into very early after being in the workforce for a bit. And with that relationship, I didn't notice red flags. I wasn't paying attention to misaligned values or intentions. It wasn't something that I was familiar with. So coming back after that relationship, that's when I started figuring out, okay, I got to be more thoughtful about learning how to date, teaching myself how to date, and then dating with a lot of intention as I kind of go forward, because I didn't want to make the same mistake again.
Yeah, and before we get into Clara, I guess I want to ask you, do you think that that is like kind of a normal trajectory for a dater? It's like you have one kind of emotionally hard experience, like a really bad breakup or a long situationship, and then you decide to be more thoughtful? Or do you think that some people are starting the process from a more thoughtful place?
I think There's a lot of people out there, like my sister and then my best friend, they dated more in like high school and college. Like they didn't take it as like I wouldn't say not as seriously, like they were still intentional about like this feels good, this doesn't feel good, like dating different people, but their experience allowed them to kind of get a history and a knowledge that I just wasn't able to get, so that when they did start figuring out, okay, now we're out of college and we're going to be intentional about what we're looking for, then they were able to really figure it out quickly because they had of all that
Mm,
experience to figure out, picking up on red flags earlier or understanding like intentions earlier, watching behaviors versus words and understanding that earlier. Whereas me, when I didn't, because I didn't have all that stuff and all that experience, it was more like I was just delusional the whole time. And I don't necessarily think they got their hearts broken. Like there wasn't pieces that they had to go
right.
through hard stuff, but because they were not taking it as seriously, that's not as seriously, but not like looking for that partner right away. They were just more paying attention to learning to feel good, right? They weren't committing to anything yet.
Mhm.
I look at it like working out, like, okay, like this workout feels good. I'm going to stick to, Pilates as opposed to weightlifting, because like that's one that feels kind of good.
Interesting. Right. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's like if you have a handful of experiences whenever you start dating, that helps inform decisions versus if you're starting a little later in life, you're jumping in with less experience and you might need some more guidance.
Yeah.
I'm with you. Like I have a very similar story to you, and listeners know I got out of a relationship, and that is when I started tracking my dates using my notes app. Did you use a different tool before you built Clara for daters?
Yeah, so I was definitely having a journal, like a written journal at one
Okay.
point, but my handwriting sucks and then I kind of
Me
tend
too.
to fall off of it. And then honestly, what I realized is I'm actually a very positive person. And it's hard for me to write down the truth when it's not asked with a direct question. And that
Oh.
actually I noticed in my relationships when I was in my relationship with my ex. I had a diary that I was keeping during that time period, and I wrote down every week about this stuff, and I only wrote down the good things. Like I didn't write down the bad things, and there were bad things. There definitely were. There was only one journal entry in that whole 3-year period, and that there was a drawing of a picture of me on an island and him on an island, and I'm not an artist. But I drew this picture, and that was the only negative thing that I had in this whole journal.
That
So
is wild.
yeah, so
But
it's
I
crazy.
relate.
The
I re
brain tricks, yeah.
Yeah, I relate. I did something similar, like journaling about my relationship while in it, and I had this pattern of writing the things I was frustrated about, but then at the end of each entry, I was like convincing myself to stay. I would like be
Yep.
like, "But he's this and he's that," and it's like, "Oh, and this is good," and that's it's like every single entry was like that, and I'm like, "Oh man, I wish I had listened more to myself."
Yeah. And then compromise becomes a thing that you hear a lot in relationships, and you're like, okay, well, I'm doing well in a relationship,
Yes.
especially when you're new to the relationship. You're like, okay, well, I'm not really understanding, but I'm doing so good in compromise, like gold
Mhm.
star for me. So that was where journaling for me, I recognized pretty quickly, keeping track of it. It wasn't serving me well because I fell back into the same pattern of being super, I guess, forgiving
Positive or
on,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
forgiving on some of the things that I was literally uncomfortable with. Like there's moments in dating that you're uncomfortable and it's important that you call that out. And I wasn't doing that.
So how did we get from your crappy handwriting in your journal to Clara for daters?
So it goes a little bit back into my background as an auto executive. I did a lot of digital operations in my that's what I worked. I was managing director for digital operations and marketing. So everything that I did was trying to organize different prospects for car sales, obviously, and just trying to organize, see which ones are qualified, follow the funnel, the whole piece it. So my mind already works with that. And the thing about me is I'm a pretty like anxious attachment style kind of people pleaser person. But in this car business that's like high passion, high pressure environment, data always makes me feel calm. And
Mm.
whenever there's a high pressure environment, like, oh my God, it's the end of the month and we don't have enough sales, right? I was the person who would go into the data and show, no, we actually do have a lot of prospects here, but they're coming to us through the phone instead of the internet. And we just need to like pick up our phone game. Like, what are we doing with converting there? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it just creates some comfortability in such a high pressure space. And that was like, okay, well, how do I kind of create that into my dating life? Because I feel like that's like it's super similar to me in terms of high pressure environment, and I need to figure out how to kind of create it. So just writing down like questions that I need to ask myself in a journal, yes, no, right? And with the yes, no questions, I couldn't write maybe. I couldn't write a C, like an excuse. Like I
Mm-hmm.
had to actually do yes, no, and then it would get a point for each one. So I started kind of like putting a little point system to, okay, how was I feeling after each interaction or each date? And after like I kind of did that a couple of times, I was like, this kind of looks really cool. I called my friend who is a game designer, and I was like, can you put together some like some images of what this would look like? And he did, and out came Clara for Daters, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like I would have fun doing this.
Yes, I love that so much. And I love that, you were your first guinea pig for this experiment. I did the same thing. Like after I was tracking everything. I love the yes or no questions. Like you know yourself, you took your patterns and you changed them with this process. And I think that's something I'm trying to help people do on my podcast is like, what are your patterns that keep leading you down the path into relationships that don't serve you? And then
Mhm.
how can you change this? So okay, so you did this where you were dating online. Like, how are you getting dates in that early period?
I'm on a couple of dating apps, and I've been dating pretty intentionally for the last year and a half ish.
Mm.
And the thing about when those questions too, like in the very beginning, these were just me asking the questions. But when I actually like started really putting visions to what Clara will actually turn into, I actually ended up talking to a psychologist and saying, I want to create something for these questions that are very meaningful. So we actually created like the questions are not just personal, like what you would ask yourselves. They're actually like foundational questions to create a vibe check on if you felt physically safe, emotionally safe, relationally safe, chemistry, and values. So those are the 5 pillars, and the 10 questions always relate back to those 5 pillars. And then during your progression of dating in question, like in date 1, those questions are going to be completely different than if you're on a 5th date with that person. And an example of like a question would be like, did you feel comfortable with the conversation topics? Yes or no? Right? And the idea is for you to kind of have those thought starters. And then after the 10 set of questions, you're given a notes section to write some extra stuff of how you're feeling. But the goal is to get you asking yourself, like really honestly, like what happened, and being honest with yourself. And no one sees this, like what you're
Right,
journaling. No
right.
one sees it. So you have to be like, this is for you. I mean, if you're going to lie to yourself, then you're lying, then that's up to you. But like, no
Right.
one's going to be seeing this information. But
I
yeah,
love.
that's kind of how I kind of went through the asking the question.
Okay, so let's fast forward to what Clara for Daters looks like right now. So I'm
Mhm.
signing up. I'm on the dating apps. I'm having dates. And let's say I go on a first date with someone. I'm answering these 10 questions. After I go through these questions, what am I looking at? Like what am I seeing?
Well, there's some other interesting parts actually before you get to the first 10
Oh,
questions. I'm a data nerd, and I like to understand like how I'm doing. And I hear that a lot about women and men who just give up on dating because they're literally like, where's the return on investment? Like my time is precious, and I can't handle it right now. I don't have a return. It's hurting my mental health. Like, and I respect everyone who says those things because it's real. It's a real feeling, and I've definitely been there. But
mhm.
the reality is you have to do the work in order to like get to what you want. And if you're honest with what you want, then this is a journey. And that's how I look at it. That's how I keep going on dates week after week. Even though I haven't found someone yet, that's how I do it. So some of the other data that I collect, right, for me, which is interesting, is like I'm on a couple of different dating apps. Which dating apps actually have the best prospect value to getting to a second, third, or fourth date. Like, does Hinge perform better for me versus
Mm-hmm.
Bumble, or does Tinder, or does Upward? Like, all these different dating apps, which ones perform better for me? And you can aggregate that information yourself, right, to understand that. And we already do. Like, there's so many TikToks that are out there on the dating wrapped kind of scene. So people are already looking at this data. I
Right.
just created a mechanism to collect it so that when you're ready to create your PowerPoint at the end of the year for dating wrapped, you have it. But that's one of the things. So first you're logging where you met them, like where,
Mm-hmm.
and it can also be in real life because maybe you met them through friends or something else. The next thing that you would put the information is who they are. Just, I would do a screenshot of their picture, put it up there, their age, just some basic information. And then you go on the date. So where was the date? Putting the information on where you went. And then what you did, if there was activities, and then venue rating. Like, was it a good date spot? Because I can tell you, I've had definitely some first dates ruined when the date spot is bad because my mood
Yes.
gets so
Yeah.
crappy. And this is kind of helping me understand, like, was I not liking him or was I not liking the crappy food that I was eating?
Right.
So differentiating the different pieces. And then also your mood. We have it recorded. So your mood going into the date was something, and then your mood after the date was different. And then when the date was, all those things. So like for me, for example, I try not to book any dates like Monday through Wednesday because I'm very specific on, like, I have I want to get my work done. I need to wake up early to go to the gym. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to mess that routine up. And if I book a date during those days, I'm not as relaxed. I'm a little bit more anxious. I'm rushing it because I want to make sure I go to bed early to get to the gym, all those things. But then if I date on Thursday, Friday, my mood's better. So it's another insight that I learned reviewing my own data.
Noticing you say all this stuff, it's like Clara is really helping daters set themselves up for success because there are all these factors in our control. Like, we can't control the other person, right? But we have so many other factors that we can control, like our mood, the location, the day of the week, all this stuff. And that can actually make dating a more fun and positive experience alone. So I love that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm really a person of, like, accountability, and for me, being able to control some of the control factors is feels, again, puts me back into my safety mode, puts me back into feeling
Mm-hmm.
good, and then sets me up for success, as what you said, in going to meet someone and having this social connection.
Yeah, you want the best shot possible, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I try to kind of communicate to users and then other daters out there is looking at dating like it's a social connection, interaction. That's a win in itself
Yes.
because there's so many people struggling with loneliness and self-isolation and not dating for months and months and months and, like, just upset. And you just going on one date is it's a social connection. The outcome, it is what it is, right? We'll figure it out. It comes or doesn't. But if we can just say, it's like going to the gym. If we can just say, we went to the gym, like, it wasn't a bad gym session, we went, it was good.
I'm resonating so hard with this. I like, yes, get your reps in. It's practice. You're learning something. That's the ROI. Like what you were saying earlier, you are learning something about yourself, your patterns. You're working on this skill, which is like
Yeah.
dating is a skill we can learn. And yeah, I agree. In Seattle, like when I was dating, I definitely leveraged dating as social interaction, even though I had a small group of friends. I was new. I was only lived there for 3 years. So I started from scratch with friends and
Yeah.
they weren't available every night. And I worked alone in my house all day long with only
Yeah.
my dog, Coconut, for company. So
Yeah.
yes, like I really leveraged and like needed dating for that social interaction, even if it didn't go anywhere. It was so useful.
Yeah, it's useful. And the fact is, it's hard in the beginning and I saw that with my users too,
Mm.
because we're choosing in the beginning when we're not paying attention. The dating can be hard because you're choosing people based on the wrong information, right? They're
Okay.
hot, they have this, blah, blah, blah. You're choosing people based on what the dating apps are honestly giving you a criteria for thinking important. But once you start dating and getting used to what you're looking for, you get better at choosing the right people to go on dates with. So
Yes.
the quality of your dates start getting a lot better after learning all this information and being intentional. So I really haven't been on a bad date in a while now because I know what I'm looking for, and early on in the conversations or in whatever, I can pretty quickly understand if this is someone that I would want to go on a date with and have a quality date versus not. But again, before I was not like actually logging and having that intentionality, yes, I was getting a lot of bad dates because I was like, well, he's attractive, he's over 6 feet, like all those things. And I was like, wait a minute, think I'm picking this wrong again. Like I need to
Yeah.
adjust.
So I have a question about Clara's features. So is there any way to input my own criteria? Like if I'm looking for something specific, can I add some way to rate my dates based on like I'm looking for someone who's really family oriented? Could I score them on that?
So not at this point. There are goals to really build those pieces out and
Right.
see what can happen.
I know
Yeah.
how difficult it is with a new product and how, oh my gosh. So yes, I can imagine you have a lot more you want to do.
Yeah, I tell people like I built the Rolls Royce of what I wanted, like the huge jet, but I was like, but we have like the tricycle right now and we're
Yeah,
working through it to make sure everyone likes it and is using it. But eventually there's a lot of opportunities to see where this goes. And that's one of them is to kind of get it really personalized to each user. And that's why I'm excited, honestly, for AI and how that's going to like impact technology moving forward. I've seen a lot of people integrating AI in a different way than I would. For me, AI is very much about hyper personalization of what you're looking for. So it's gathering data and summarizing it as
right.
opposed to like, should I go out with him again? I don't want AI to be that. I want you to have your intuition and your understanding to answer those questions.
For
But
sure.
for hyper personalization of data, and as we keep collecting it, like that's where it's going to get really exciting in the next year.
Yes. And one more question I just have about this. As we're using Clara for daters, is the point of it to, I'm sure the answer is like both, but is the point of it like to learn more about ourselves or to decide who to pursue in a relationship? Like when you made this, like what was your thought around that?
Yes, my goal one was to learn to date better
Hmm.
for me and to do it consistently. So part of like the origin story is like I read all these wonderful books and all of them and they're great. There's so many great authors out there. Attached is a great book. How Not to Die Alone by Logan Ury. Like I love all these different books. But then I would get into it and start dating and I would forget everything I read. Like everything.
Yep.
You're in it, right? And you're excited and it's whatever. So this was me. This was a result of me actually taking myself accountable to, I believed all this stuff that I read, but let me keep myself like accountable to actually doing it. And then the second part is yes, my goal is to eventually get to the right person, right? And I do want to let go of relationships that aren't serving me and nurture relationships that are. And as a person who kind of dated and committed like in my head, not in terms with the person, but in my head, be like,
Yes, not explicitly, just
yeah,
right,
not
mentally.
explicit, just be like, this is him. This is gonna be the person. I'm gonna date him hard and never like let him go. Like that's it. Now having to like adjust my thinking and be like, okay, I'm on a second date with this guy and I'm on a second date with this guy. And that's okay. Just we're dating. It's a second date with 2 days different guys. Who do I feel better about going on a third date with? Right. And that's kind of where that information gets a lot clearer because then
Hmm.
you have 2 different scores for your vibe checks. You have 2 different moods and your notes on how everything went. So you can kind of understand better like who you want to keep continuing to nurture the relationship with. And that's actually another feature within Clara because I struggle with it. So everything that you see is like my struggle
Everyone
points.
does. Yes.
So defining the relationship is definitely a struggle point for me because I get again into mode where I'm committed, like this is going to be it. But I actually created a place for users to categorize how they're feeling about the person themselves. So Claire is never going to tell you, put this person in situationship, territory, but you can go do it yourself because you're understanding that. So there's a couple different things where it's like, okay, it's new and exciting, or there's potential and I'm getting excited, and then committed, and then, feeling situationship territory, but all those different categories kind of are there. And for me, it honestly has been really helpful. There was a guy that I was seeing last year, and I had him at like, it's getting exciting. Like I'm excited. There's potential and I'm excited.
Hmm.
But then his communication started falling off and I wasn't feeling as confident in it. And I started just adding notes to the prospect during that time. I was like, it's been odd. Haven't been on a date with him for a while. He hasn't asked me out. I'm not sure what's going on. And then I'm like, and after 3 notes, I'm like, I probably should put this into situationship territory, right? Like I'm like recategorizing myself. I'm being proactive about it. And then when I wrote the note, I'm like, hey, I feel like the vibe's off. And I felt confident to say that because I had all this data supporting my feeling. So I was like, I now feel confident actually reaching out to him and saying, hey, the energy feels off. And then it did. He communicated back to me. He's like, yeah, he had an ex that he was, rekindling things with. And I was like, got
Naturally.
it. Yeah. But the reality was I felt so much better about it was like I was like a weather channel person and I was seeing the storm coming and I knew it was coming, so I was prepared. So it wasn't emotionally draining or emotionally hurting when the information actually came because I knew it was coming.
Right.
And my rebound rate on keeping dating wasn't as hurt
Right.
because I was so in tune with what was going on.
I love that. I love how the data keeps you grounded. Same thing for me. Like this is exactly why I tracked my dates too, is it kept me really grounded in what was happening in reality, not in my head.
Yeah.
Like not what I was hoping for, not what I was fantasizing about, literally what was actually going down in reality. What were their actions saying? Also, I wanted to just mention really quick because we were talking about like how Clara can guide you towards deciding to be in a relationship with someone. And I will say, like, when I was tracking my dates, I think I only tracked up to 7 dates with my current my fiance, my fiance. That was at that point I had enough data to know that I was ready and desired a relationship with that person. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So with Clara, you can get to that point where you're just not feeling you don't need to track it as much.
Right.
But even with me, and I've had users who actually in relationships who keep using it because it's a nice for memory on, oh, we went to this restaurant at this time. And
yeah. I love having that information.
That part of it too, if you're just interested in, being a diary kind of person or maintenance mode when you're looking at when you're comparing it to something similar. But no, I mean, the need for if you feel like you're over analyzing it in every spot, then take a step back and just enjoy the connection. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, there was a point where I just didn't need it anymore. So I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about your favorite topic, which I guess is data. So Clara has been out there for a year now, right? Like active, and you have a year's worth of data.
Yes. So we launched it February of last year. And again, this is the MVP, meaning the most viable product. So again, back to the tricycle, it's the very basic piece. But the goal was to put it out there and see if this was something that people would use. Because one, there's not another Clara out there. There isn't. It just doesn't exist. And that's why Clara for Daters, not a dating app, is part of the title because people get so confused on what it is. Because you cannot meet anyone on Clara for Daters. It is not a matching tool. This is a post-matching intentional dating logbook or journal, and that's what it is. That's the only purpose that it serves.
Right.
So we've had it out since February of last year, and the goal was just to see who would pick it up organically in a very, meaningful way, because it's not something that it's going to get you an instant reward. You won't get a dopamine hit because you got a match. It's not going to get you're not going to be able to buy anything or purchase anything. The data is the value, and you actually have to use it in order to find the value. It's a harder conversion in terms of technology, but it's very valuable once it gets there. So after the first year, we did find a really good group of users, and I'm very happy to say that everyone who downloads it never deletes it. They're always using it, and they're logging it very consistently. So they get it right away. And we had over 1,000 dates logged in this first year.
Amazing. That is awesome. People out there dating. I love it.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about what you found, and you sent me kind of an overview of what you've found. And so something I felt validated when reading from your data is that more than a third of potential matches do not result in an in-person social interaction. I think that's just so validating. It's yes, most people you match with, you're not going to meet them, right?
And let's just take this one step further, because that information is very true, but that only pertains to the people who actually log the prospect in Clara. So it's a bigger number.
It's way bigger than that. Yes, agree.
Way bigger. These are the people that I met them. So for example, I have a couple, I'm part of that data. So like I met a couple guys on Hinge, thought that it was going to result in a date, logged them into Clara. And then before we actually got to a date, it didn't happen. So
Yep.
that's literally the trajectory of that journey. But there's so many people that you match with, talk on the apps, and you don't log into Clara. And that's part of where I'm excited for potential opportunities to collaborate with dating apps, because I think if we can actually get that information and
Yeah.
have that integration where we see that happening, that is something that we can improve upon as like people in this industry.
100%. And I just, yeah. So, like, people listening, if you find that a lot of your matches aren't converting to dates, you are not alone. A lot of them fizzle before you meet in person. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It's just part of, it's like the nature of it. And the same thing with in person, right? It's not just apps. Like, I think in person meetings have a similar success or failure rate to getting to a date. Like, just because you meet someone in a coffee shop and like you hit it off does not mean you're going to make it to a first date.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think for all
Okay.
of this information, it gives you at least grace to understand it too, so that it doesn't hurt every time like it's there. It's just like for personal stuff, it's like, okay, this is me and this actually what happened.
Another one I found really interesting is Bumble versus Hinge in terms of getting second dates. So
Yeah.
your data shows that Bumble beats out Hinge in this way.
So Hinge gets the most first dates, so it actually converts into the most first dates for Clara users, but Bumble has less first dates, but they actually have more second dates.
That is so
So
interesting.
yeah.
I
So
wonder.
and that's another interesting thing to kind of tap on. So again, my data is based off my users and what they log. So the top 3 dating apps that my users used were Hinge, Bumble, and then Tinder. And then we had a couple using Field, and those were interesting just in itself, but the top 3 were definitely Hinge, Bumble, and Tinder. And it was interesting too that Tinder was one of the smaller ones, considering Tinder is much bigger than Hinge and Bumble in terms of how many people are on it. But
Right.
again, that kind of points to intentionality and people who are using a Clara for Daters tool versus, how they're using the different dating apps as well. Yeah.
That's wild. I mean, Bumble was my second used, like I had Hinge was of my first, like the one I used the most, and Bumble and then Tinder. But I think if I have my own data to look at, but off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure I would say 90% of my Bumble dates converted to second dates.
Yeah.
But there were fewer of them compared to Hinge. But
Yeah.
yes, that is so interesting.
That's me too. And that was me. For me, I've had more Hinge first dates and get more traffic off Hinge.
Yeah.
But with Bumble, I tend to get to a second or third, and there's a lot fewer. So then it goes back to that just idea of quality versus quantity. But again, as we keep growing and we can improve and have more data sets, I would love to see that information based on area, right?
Right.
Is Southern California different than Northern California? Is California different than New York? Like, as we keep growing, that's one of the data sets that I would love to start comparing in. And then
I'm
even
so
during
excited.
seasons.
I'm
Yeah.
excited to see, like, when we talk again next year, what you've got, in terms of the data, because this is just the beginning.
Oh,
So can we
yeah.
talk? I want to talk about this one, post connection date disparity. So you say of those who reported their social interactions as a 10 out of 10, 73% ranked their post date mood as a 6 or below. So does that mean that after their date they felt, well, 73% reported a 6 or below? Yeah.
Yeah, they felt a little underwhelmed. That's how I read that
Interesting.
data, is
Okay.
that I feel, and I think this is the thing about this first year of data, and I'd love to see how that switches to once they've been dating for a while, right? Intentionally dating for a while. Because I think a lot of the users were like me in that first year, or in that first, 6 months of logging my dates, is that I go out with a guy who looked like a 10 on paper, and then I'd actually come back and be underwhelmed by the experience. And that's something where behavior change occurs. And the goal is to have all of our users learn, okay, now this is the person that I'm looking for, and not put so much pressure on it too, on terms
Mhm.
of like before versus after. But I
Right.
think keeping our expectations managed and recognizing, it's a social connection, it's something to be out, interaction, like those are all positive things. But that was an interesting one that
Yeah,
I'm
that is
looking forward to
interesting.
seeing, like how it translates in another 6 months, 9 months.
And I would say, like, towards the end of my dating journey, after I had a lot of experience, right, went out with a lot of people, my mood was definitely middle. right after a
Yeah.
date. But I didn't take that as a bad sign. That didn't mean it was a bad date. It's just like, okay, that was an experience I had. Like it's neutral.
Yeah, and that might be so then our that's another kind of thing that is a non-controllable aspect, whereas
Right.
like neutral now means 10 for you, right? As in
Mm,
a
hmm.
spark was a 10 before, like a spark hot chemistry, but now neutral is a 10. So that's
Right.
something that we're trying to correlate with a data that's, more qualitative than anything. And that scale that a person has internally is going to adjust based on their experiences. So that's another thing that'll be interesting to
Oh,
track.
man, I feel like I just missed it. Like I think I was dating right before you made this. So I'm like, I wish I had this. It's so cool. So I want to shift gears a little bit and I want to talk about your past relationship experience because I know, you mentioned earlier that you started tracking dates after a pretty bad breakup. So that relationship was 3 years, right?
Yes.
What was the ending of that like, if you don't mind sharing a little bit?
Yeah, not at all. So it was my first very serious relationship. We were adults when we met. We dated for a year, with each other for two, and we were on the path to marriage. Like we were doing premarital counseling.
Oh,
Like that was
wow.
part of the journey. He had an engagement ring, all of those pieces, and it was interesting because there were parts of us that through counseling, through exercise together, through everything, we were getting so strong as a couple during that 3 year period that I was noticing all of those things, right? Then COVID hit at the end of, COVID, it was the end of 2020. COVID was there and I was staying at home more. I was being more aware. I wasn't traveling. So there were things that like I was just like getting in tune to. And then I was home. One night I was home, I was drying my hair, I was looking in the mirror, watching, myself dry my hair, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw the reflection of his phone. And in the reflection of his phone, I saw like an image of a female. And I was like, usually I'm thinking about work, I'm not like paying attention, but in that
Yeah.
moment, there was enough of a feeling that I was like, what was that? And I asked, and he said nothing. And then for some reason there was something in me that was being more intuitive, more pushing. I was like, no, I need to understand what is it. And I kept pushing, pushing, pushing. And at the end of the day, he really just confessed a lot, but he had actually been cheating on me for the whole 3 year relationship, like never was
Oh
monogamous
my
at
God.
all. And yeah, and it was devastating. It was one of those experiences where I was like, how does this happen? Especially because I was so positive on like, we were going to therapy every other
Yeah.
week. Like we were
Right.
doing
You
all
were
the
doing
right
all the
things.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. And he had every intention of continuing this life, doing the life with me too at the same time. So it was really earth shattering. And honestly, after that experience and having like no confidence in myself to pick the right person again and just being terrified, because that's how I came out of it. Like after that,
Yeah.
I was
Who wouldn't? I mean,
I,
jeez.
I was terrified, but it's like, it's not only that he hurt me, but he hurt me being able to trust myself. And that
Of
hurt
course.
more because I have every aspiration to have kids and get married. Like, those are really important things for me. And I know they're not for everyone, but for me, I really value that for me to have personal fulfillment, like to have a loving marriage and to have children within a loving marriage. That's very important to me. And I couldn't see a way forward after that betrayal, after that 3 year betrayal. I couldn't figure out a way forward. So that's where, with Clara, I had to get back to where I felt safe. And safety for me is data. And that's how it all kind of came about with that.
I'm just so proud of you. Like, I mean, I just feel that is just such a satisfying ending or point where you are now to this chapter of your life or whatever, like how you've transitioned from the place of feeling like you could never trust anyone or yourself again, which I know is so dark and so relatable for a lot of listeners, to now where you've taken the steps. You're not like, it wasn't a light switch, it wasn't
Yeah.
overnight. You've worked on yourself, you've taken these steps, you've grown and developed into a person who can trust again, does believe in love, knows that someone is out there who's going to be so faithful
Yeah.
and is going to be an incredible partner. I'm so glad that you have Clara. I'm so glad Clara exists. Yeah, that's amazing. So
And it's not perfect. I mean,
no.
every time there's that fear that comes up, but that's where Clara is so helpful for me, is because when I come back to logging and like reflecting, I'm like, I'm being honest with myself. I'm figuring out this stuff as I go. So it's never perfect. Even
Mhm.
after figuring out, I think it's about giving ourselves grace and figuring out what makes us feel strong. But grace is a big thing on this journey for
Yes.
sure.
I really relate to that. I'm glad you said that because it's just like, yeah, you're right. Even after all this time, it's not totally gone, but you know enough about yourself, the experience, the data to override or like kind of, it's like you can acknowledge these feelings, but you don't have to act on them, right? Even if
Yes.
you're feeling distrusting, which is like valid, you
Yes.
now know how to navigate that a little bit differently with more knowledge, and that's amazing.
Well, and to have the uncomfortable conversation too,
Right, right, right.
early on.
You
Yeah,
face it head on. Yeah,
yeah,
100%.
yeah.
That's amazing. We're almost out of time, so I want to just do a quick listener question and then we'll wrap up. All right. So I, 28F, am now dating two men. Neither are exclusive yet. The first one I've been friends with for 6 years and I've recently slept with twice. The second one I met by chance in real life and I've gone on 2 dates with so far. I like them both for different reasons and I'm not ready to make a solid choice yet as it's still very early. On one hand, me and the guy who I've been friends with have a longer history, but we may not want the same things long term in the future. On the other hand, the guy I've been out with twice, we have plenty in common and I want to see where it goes, but I worry he might be too affectionate early on. So, with both guys, I haven't spoken to either of them about what we're looking for, and I'm feeling pretty nervous to bring up these conversations. For the guy that I just met, we're going on dates, but the guy that I've been friends with, we haven't talked about the friends with benefit situation, so it's more confusing right now. In the past, I've dated immature jerks, so I want to steer clear of old habits and attractions to the wrong people, which is why I chose this question for you, by the way. Obviously, I don't want to get my heart broken, but I know that I have to open up if I want to find the right guy long term. I'm unsure what I want in the present if that wasn't obvious. And I'm worried to voice my needs out loud to these men. So what should I do? So yeah, just to recap, we've got a friend with benefits that she's known for a while. We've got a newer prospect that she's seen twice, who is seemed to be more aligned, but she has this like great history with the friend guy.
What I picked up on was that she was pretty certain on what she wants in her future, but she's not certain what she wants right now.
Yes.
So I would recommend that she make choices now based on what she wants in the future.
Mm.
So she hasn't had those conversations because she doesn't know what she wants now. But she, again, to create for a future that you want, you have to make those decisions and have those conversations now. So I think if she can put herself into that power of, I know what I want for my future, and sit and have and feel that, I think she will find the courage to have the uncomfortable conversations with both, with a friends with benefits one, communicating what you want for your future with them. Do our intentions align? How does that feel? And how you're feeling in this friends with benefits situation. Do you feel uncomfortable? Do you want to define? But having that conversation, again, always remembering what you want for your future and that you are clear on what you want for your future. And with
Yes.
the other person, same conversation. Do I feel aligned? And giving that kind of a shot,
Yeah.
communicating that, you are picking up on some characteristics that are feeling like uncomfortable. Like maybe I think they didn't say clingy. She
Of
said
too
something like
overly affectionate
too
early
overly
on, which I'm not
affectionate.
sure what that means, but maybe she feels like suffocated or just aware of or on guard of how
Yeah.
affectionate he is.
So, and with that, I mean, I don't think affection is necessarily a bad thing. However, if you communicate, I'm uncomfortable with this, like this feels better when you're checking in with me once a week versus 3 times a week, and communicate what feels good for you. See how this person reacts. You don't know this person as much as the other person who's your friend, but if this person takes feedback in a positive way and adjusts, that's a really good green
Yeah,
flag.
huge green flag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would for her, she needs to stop feeling about I'm confused of what I want and think about I know what I want and I need to make choices now
Right.
on based on what I want for the future.
Great advice. Seriously, Jillian, great advice. I've heard that this described as like you are on a bus, like you're driving a bus of your
Mhm.
life and it's going in one direction. You have your route and it's like people can get on the bus and if they're going in the same direction, great. But if they're not, they have to get off. Like
Yeah.
your bus is going on your route. You know,
Oh,
that's
for sure.
and that it's not like a personal, it's not like a big scary or hard rejection. It's just like you're going one way and if they're not going that way, that's neutral. Like it's not, it doesn't mean you did anything wrong. I think another trap, I mean, this person said they are 28. I think there's like, this might come with more maturity, but it's like when you're first starting to date, I don't know if you had this experience, you're very worried about what they want and making
Hmm.
sure you are aligning. And it's like, no, 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 no. You've got to put your wants and needs first and
Yeah.
see if they are aligned. And it's honestly, it can be really fun to both talk about this together. It doesn't have to be like a scary conversation. It can be really fun and just like,
Yeah.
where do you see yourself in 5 years? That's a fun conversation to have. You don't have
Yeah.
to put so much pressure on it.
Yeah. I do think it's fun. And I do think there's the right people that you're dating will find that really fun. And the ones that don't, like, if your goal is again to be in a committed relationship, then you don't want to be with the people who are not feeling excited about that possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Every good relationship that I've seen with my friends and family, these people, these men, and it's mostly the men with the women, these men are so excited to be a husband. Like that's what they're excited to be. Like they're excited to be in a relationship. And that's what you deserve and that's what you
Right.
want.
That
So,
was my fiance.
yeah. Yeah.
Like he was, yeah, like he's excited for all of it. You know, he's very
Exactly.
into it. Yeah.
Yeah, you want that. And
Yeah.
everyone deserves that. And I get that there's like a fear of commitment happening a lot in general, but there's still people out there who feel like powerful in getting into that, relationship and whatnot. So
Mm-hmm.
she can do it. She just needs to sit in her
Yes.
power a bit.
Yes. In that power, girl. I love it.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I have one more question for you, and that is, what do you want to see more of in dating culture right now?
I think everyone is just so confused. I think everyone is just lost and confused in so many ways, regardless of your gender, of your sexuality. People are just so confused. One of the other reasons why I created Clara is because I don't think you can get past a confused state like this without looking at data. And my hope is that if we can all start paying attention to what's actually happening, then we can make a positive change forward. But at this point, it feels like dating, everyone's just throwing crap on the wall and seeing what works. And it's like, that's not how we make moves as humans. That's not what we do in our businesses. That's not what we do in our nutritional goals or whatever goals. We're always basing it off of information. So that's the thing that I hope for dating is that if we can get a little bit unclouded in the next 5 years, 10 years of people and understanding what modern digital introductions like mean and what they look like and how relationships and defining relationships are all different, we can figure out some clarity amongst that. I think that's the most important thing that we could do, and that's what dating needs to happen. It needs to just unravel the confusion, decloud the fog.
I'm with you. Less confusion, more data.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jillian, for sharing all this insight and telling us more about Clara. How can we get Clara? Where is it?
Okay, so yeah, Clara for Daters is in the App Store. So if you just search Clara for Daters in the App Store, you can download it. It's absolutely free. This is the free version. My goal is to bring it to Android this year, but I need to get to a critical mass of users for Clara for Daters on the App Store before I can get that. So if you don't have an iOS phone, then tell your friends to do it so we can get you over to Android because we're close. We're just not there yet. But it's Clara for Daters.
We'll get there.
In the App Store. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks again. This has been so enlightening and refreshing to hear you talk about data so much. It is very inspiring. And I hope that the listeners feel inspired to track dates, whether you're using Clara or not. Just get that information.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Your own peace of mind.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.